everyone, welcome back to a new episode of Our Leaders, Our Inspiration. So here with me today, I have the honor to meet with the Ambassador of Germany to Indonesia, Miss Ina Lepel.
Selamat siang semuanya.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for having me in your embassy today.
Leadership partners, thank you very much for taking interest in education in Germany.
So for today's episode, of course, as my program, we usually talk about education. So today we're going to find out more about the education system in Germany. So, Ms. Ina, may I ask how does the education system in Germany work?
Well, of course, it's pretty like in many other countries. There is a preschool, but that is voluntary and usually people have to pay for it from about 2 to 6 years. Between the age of 6 and 7, people join elementary school. That's followed by a choice of 3 types of schools, or actually 4. There is one that leads to only to middle school degree. Another one that also leads to middle school, but it's longer and gives more perspectives. And then there is high school that leads to the ability to study at university. And there is also another school type that comprises all 3 together. So students can switch between the school types more easily because they are in the same school in the first place.
Oh, may I know how the German government supports education?
It supports it very strongly because in our philosophy, education is a public good. So education is totally free.
Oh, it's totally free.
It will be free. That's kindergarten is out of the system. It's private, but from elementary school until university, it's paid by the government.
Oh,
And I think it's actually a good thing that the government is spending so much money on this. Yes. All the buildings, the teachers, everything is fully paid. Of course, private schools also exist. Some of them actually also very strongly subsidized by the government, and some totally free. Then for these, the parents have to pay. But anyone who wants to visit the public school, they can, and they have a good supply in their neighborhood.
oh. And actually, I think that the German government not only supports education for scholarships for German people, but also for international students, because a lot of my friends actually go to university in Germany and they actually get a lot of support for scholarships.
Right. Well, I think the big scholarship people can ask for is the fact that education in universities is free, including for international students. So all the international students have to worry about is cost of living, which can actually be a challenge because the cost of living has gone up in Germany in recent inflation, especially rooms, housing. So it makes sense to look for a place, maybe small towns, where housing is not such an issue.
Yes.
But in general, I think compared to many other countries, the biggest intrinsic scholarship is that university education is free. There are scholarships, but they only start for people who have already earned their bachelor's degree.
Oh, so it's the master's degree.
It's for master's degree or doctorate. There are no German government scholarships for people who just want to go for a bachelor's degree, except for a very limited number of exceptions. But so I think if people say they are on scholarship in Germany while studying for a bachelor's degree, they are probably with a scholarship from the Indonesian government.
Oh, right. Yes. One thing I also learned is that vocational training is actually something that is very highlighted in their German education systems.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's something that I think Indonesia is trying to emphasize more on too. So may I ask, what is the reason behind that, and what role does vocational training play in the German education system?
Actually, vocational training in the dual system is still pretty much the mainstream option most school leavers choose, because with that they can earn money from day one. They join a company and then they spend some time working in that company and some time working, studying at a vocational school. They don't get a huge salary, but unlike people who go to university and have to worry about their cost of living, usually they at least get some money from that company, depending on the sector, the base, and so on, how much that is. Many people in vocational training, that when they are German people, they are still with their parents. So cost of living is then not such a big issue.
Yes.
So that's attractive, and it's also a good way to get integrated into the labor market, because it's very practice oriented from day one. The young people are fully integrated into the workforce of their company while learning. So they can already see in the workplace whether this job works for them or not. They already get used to the company, and there is a very high rate of young people being taken over for permanent jobs by the company once they finish that training. The training can take from 2 years to 3.5, depending on the profession and the curriculum. And there are more than 300 different curricula to choose from.
And I think that's more effective too, because usually bachelor's in peace 4 years. So vocational training is 3 years.
That's true.
Yeah.
But it doesn't count as a bachelor's degree in our system. It's a bit below, although people who make it all the way to Meister, they can also switch to a more academic orientation. But usually by that time, they are very keen to open their own company and start training young people themselves.
I see. May I ask, what do you think is the main difference between the education system in Germany and other countries, maybe like Indonesia?
Well, I think the German system focuses very much on teaching the student how to learn, how to discover for him or herself complex issues. Many schools require students to actually do some independent research and then present the results to the class. And the more original that is, the better. It's also a system that encourages discussion. So it's not so much frontal that the teacher stands in front of the class and explains the work, but it's more discursive, that people can ask questions, or that the teacher gets people to discuss various points of views. Obviously, that doesn't work in mathematics. There is usually only one correct solution. But in subjects like history or geography, there is a lot of things people can have different ideas about.
Sure.
And that's why it is very valued if people can present their own point of view in a good and eloquent way, rather than just repeating what the teacher has said.
Oh. So in Germany, it's more of an interactive learning system.
Yes.
Oh, I think that's great. Are there any challenges that the German government face with education?
Oh, lots of challenges, of course.
Sure.
It's really expensive on the budget. And our demography has also been a bit complicated, that at some point there were very few new students in the schools. So many schools were closed or used for something else. And then suddenly there was a growth of student population again. And suddenly there were capacity issues in the schools, that there was not enough food, that schools were too old, that were not enough teachers. So these are some of the issues we are struggling with at the moment. But the teacher workforce is very motivated. They know that they are working with the young generation, that is the future, and are doing a very good job under sometimes very challenging conditions. One issue, of course, is also integrating young people who do not have German as first language. and who may start schooling from a situation where they don't have any German. So there have to be special classes to teach them, but also special assistance for them to actually follow complicated classes in a language that's not their own, or to write test papers in a language they are not entirely comfortable with. So that also requires a lot of extra capacities, which is another challenge.
Is that for international students?
Where international students usually don't join the school system. In the university system, it's different. It's more international students friendly in that, at least from bachelor degree onward, many programs are taught in English. So the German students actually have to get used to listening to lectures in English, and it's much more convenient for foreign international students, of course, to follow the lecture in English as well. So once you have your bachelor's degree, and in some universities also you can go for the bachelor's degree in English, but the schools, at least the mainstream schools, are pretty much in German. There are some few bilateral or multilingual schools that teach interlanguages, but there are not so many of them. Many of them are actually tribal.
Oh, so most of the universities speak in German language.
Most of the universities speak in German language, but they offer programs in English. But the vast majority of schools are in German.
Oh, I see.
So all the teaching, all the papers, all the tests are in German.
Because my friends that go to university in German, they have to take German courses. Yes, I think that's one of the requirements also for
Yeah, they have to have a basic understanding of German in order to manage everyday life.
I see.
Because especially in small town where not everybody speaks very good English,
Yes.
it's much better and people feel much more welcomed if they have a bit of German language. So they can go to the bakery and get their bread or whatever, and go to the supermarket and also manage their paperwork at the university. For strictly studying, if it's an English language program, it's not required, but it's very much recommended, and in some cases also required to have a basic knowledge of German.
I see. Oh, I think that's really interesting about the education system in Germany. Maybe now that we've talked about the education system there, may I ask about your education background, Liz?
Yeah,
Go to school in German from kindergarten to high school.
that's right. Yes.
Or to university?
Also,
Also at university.
yeah, I went to kindergarten, then elementary school. During my elementary school time, I moved from one city to another and then continued my elementary school there. From there to high school, and after graduating from high school, that was already in 1981, I went on to university, at first in the northern German city of Kiel, and then after 2 years, after the bachelor's degree, I went to Bonn, to another university. I studied economics. And during my time in Bonn, I took part in an exchange program between my university and Indiana University in the US. And went for a double degree and got my master's degree from Indiana. And then a year later also from Bonn University.
I see. Wow, that's very interesting. May I know if growing up you were a good student? Were you always the diligent student?
Yeah, I think I tried to be, yeah.
You try to be. I see. May I know if you had any tips for students like me? Since I just entered university last year.
Yeah, well, I think university is a time to discover things, to not just look at the immediate curriculum, but to really use the fact that university means university education. I think many universities also here offer courses that are a bit extracurricular, not strictly required, but okay to take. So, for instance, when I was studying at Bonn University, I came across a class in Indonesian language.
Oh, yes.
And thought, oh, that's interesting. I always wanted to know more about Asia. So why not go for the class? It's only 2 hours a week. So I went for that class and actually learned some Bahasa at that time. I think I followed that for 1 or 2 years. So when I got posted here, I already had some basic idea of how that language works, although I had forgotten practically all the words.
Oh, but I actually heard from your staff that your Indonesian is actually really good.
Yes, once I got here, I got very diligent in learning because it's here it's so motivating. People are happy if you try to speak. They don't get upset if you make a mistake. And it's a lot more fun and interactive if one can talk to people in their own language.
May I ask if you ever expected to become an ambassador?
When I started my career at the Foreign Service, that was not really the expectations because we were told not everybody who starts will also end up as an ambassador. We also have plenty of opportunities for consul general or just people with relevant positions in the capital. So I was actually relaxed about that and just did the best.
I see. And may I know how long has it been since you became the ambassador of the Germans and Indonesians?
I have been here since September 21. So already more than
3 years. Oh,
more than 3 years, yeah.
well, almost 4 years.
Mostly, yes.
Years. What was your first impression of Indonesianness?
Well, we'd come to Indonesia before as a tourist in the 90s.
Oh,
Yeah,
so you've been here before.
I had been here before, and also on 2 business-related trips I had also visited in 2012 and 2018. So it was not something completely new for me, but I was actually struck by the enormous development, especially Jakarta had taken between all my previous visits. When I came here the first time in the 90s, it was still greener, but also much more chaotic and actually not very interesting for tourists.
Yes.
When I came again in 2012, it was already much more lively, but there was a lot of construction going on, so it was actually difficult for somebody who likes to walk to move from one place to the other. In 2018, again, it was very impressive, lots of new buildings, lots of new things. And now, again, the city has changed a lot.
It drastically changed.
Yes, and I would say it has become greener again. All the trees and parks, and at least in the area where I live, they are trying very hard to set up sidewalks so people actually can walk. And it has become a more livable city, and I have the impression it has also become more interesting for foreign tourists.
I see. I think a lot of the viewers are curious if what are the problems you usually face as an ambassador? Maybe if there are any ones that would like to be an ambassador one day.
I think one of the particular challenges being a German ambassador in Indonesia is that the working methods or the planning rhythms in our 2 countries are very different.
Yes.
Germans like to make long-term planning and to have everything sorted and scheduled like 2 months, 6 weeks in advance of, for instance, a trip. Whereas Indonesians are more spontaneous. As come up with their travel projects maybe 3 weeks before if they're organized, sometimes later. And that's why actually quite few travel projects end up not working out. Because for the German side, it's difficult to set up a meaningful program for a guest who only gives them 3 weeks notice.
Yes.
And for German people, officials who want to come to Indonesia for a visit, they expect their program to be more or less its shape, maybe 10 days before they come. And that's when usually people, they start thinking about who might be people. And by that time, sometimes people in Germany feel maybe we are not really wanted. So that's better stop it and do it later. And on the Indonesian side, if they don't give the German side enough time, also they don't get the program they expect, or it can even not be done at all. So as an ambassador, my challenge is to explain that then to both sides and to ask the German side to please be flexible and try to improvise a bit and be agile when an important Indonesian delegation wants to come. And also trying to explain to the Indonesian side that if they want the Germans to actually arrive, it would be nice to make some suggestions a bit in advance, because of course it's also not wrong to prepare the content of the meeting well. And that does require time. Many people want to be the input.
Yeah.
So that is a bit of a challenge.
I think that is something that Indonesians have to learn from the German people. Definitely something you have to fix. Hopefully it will get better.
But I think the Germans could also profit from some of Indonesian spontaneity and try to be a bit not flexible. Yeah. So I think both sides can it can affect you.
Yeah, yes. Maybe for a question to motivate the young people, overall from your journey since the beginning, have you ever met failure before, and how did you deal with it?
Of course, during a long career, both in studying and in working, one always encounters failure. And I think that the key is really how to deal with it. How to acknowledge that, I made a mistake there. And try to find out why the mistake happened, if it's something that was just situational or if it's something rooted in one's approach. Or, I think also to figure out, is it something that was only my fault, or was it also a really difficult situation? And then, of course, draw the conclusion, where do I go from there? How can I prevent that kind of issue from happening the next time?
Yeah. In conclusion, of course, everyone has met failure before.
Yes.
Yes. Of course, no one is perfect. But maybe sometimes a lot of the young people, they tend to not like to admit that they failed. So I think that going from that and not giving up, I think that's something that they should learn to do.
Yes, that's a very important survival skill. It's every aspect of life, because failure is unavoidable. One can try to minimize it. One should try to minimize it, but this is only possible if one faces up to every time that something has gone wrong and really analyze why did it go wrong and how can I manage things better next time.
Yes, I totally agree with that, Wills. Maybe for the last question, do you have a message that you would like to share to the young people to motivate them maybe about their education?
Yes, my advice would be to invest heavily in education. It's not always fun, it's challenging. Sometimes one hits obstacles and it's not always easy, but it's so worthwhile. So many people who dropped out of the education system at an early stage come to really regret it. And for every effort one spends, one is really rewarded tenfold. So my suggestion would be not to be discouraged by difficulties. Every new thing is difficult at first, but there is always the learning curve effect. And the next time facing a difficulty, it will be easier than the first time. One should just not allow an obstacle to discourage one and to drop the whole thing. That is really the worst one can do.
Thank you so much for that message. I think that resonates with me a lot.
Oh, very good.
Yes, thank you so much. So I think that's all for our podcast today. Thank you so much for having me here, Bess, and thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you so much for being interested
Yeah.
and for asking so smart questions. I really do.
Oh, thank you. Hopefully we can meet again someday.
I hope so too. Thank you.
And thank you so much, everyone, for watching this episode of Our Leaders High Inspiration. I hope to see you in our next episode.